Welcome to the Chasing Thoughts podcast. Listen in as Mindy, Keith, and their guests take a deep dive into their own minds and souls to investigate the beauty of imperfection, challenge their beliefs, and embrace the richness of living a truly authentic life. Welcome to Chasing Thoughts.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to Season 2, Episode 19 of the Chasing Thoughts podcast. Today, we have special guest Ryan Skinner, who we are so excited to get to know. Welcome, Ryan.
Thank you for having me.
So I'd love to start with you sort of just sharing an overview of sort of your life story and what kind of makes you into the human that is here with us today.
It's funny, most of who I became through pain, right? Like a lot of people, I think. I had a fairly normal upbringing like most kids. I was very lucky. I had two good parents. I had an aunt and uncle to help raise me because I was back and forth with both houses. They were tremendous. I had another relative who was abusive, but he died when I was really young in second grade. So, yeah, it leaves a scar if you're abused, but it's not anything you can't come back from. Was a very shy, awkward, nervous kid all through high school. The best way I describe it, because my friends don't believe me, is I never asked a girl to a dance. It was whoever asked me. I was just so shy, and I was just painfully shy. In college, something changed. So in seventh grade, my teacher knew I couldn't read well because I had dyslexia, but she noticed I was gifted with numbers. She taught me finance. I got into the stock market. I was featured in a lot of things with Peter Lynch and women's romance. There was a big feature called The Wiz Kid Wall Street. And then I knew in seventh grade what I would do for a living. And that was important to me because I grew up, my mom was a housekeeper. My dad had two blue collar jobs. So for me, I knew now I could at least make money. And I always felt less than because we didn't have money. Fast forward, I ended up in college and I ended up following the wrong crowd. There's a kid who's like a cousin to me and I love him, but he's a tough guy. And I'm not a tough guy. I always say I'm like an iron marshmallow. I pretend to be tough. And I followed him around, and next thing you know, it's like if you act a certain way long enough, you kind of get that way. And next thing I knew, I found myself involved in dealing drugs, other things just shouldn't be doing. And I went to college. I had a scholarship for not finance because I was really smart with numbers. And it's like, and I've always landed that way because of my ability to use numbers. But I always wanted to be anything but me. I remember coming out of college, and my friend who was a real tough guy would say to me, I would give anything to be you. You could make well into six figures, honestly. Like, I'm involved in organized crime. Why don't you want to be you? And I'd be thinking to myself, I want to be anybody but me, I started drinking more. I never really paid attention. At a young age, I didn't drink because the uncle that was abusive was an alcoholic. So I associated alcoholism with abusing kids. And when I started drinking, I started feeling more comfortable in my own skin, and then I got involved in steroids and got really into the gym, and everything was taken off on the outside, faster cars, faster girls. And on the inside, I was losing who I was meant to be. My father found out I was selling steroids and he threw me out of the house my junior year of college. He said, we don't own a new car. We don't own an air conditioner, but you're ruining lives. Get out of my house. And I remember saying, I'll come back tomorrow for the rest of my stuff. And he laughed. He said, you don't ever come back here again. This is my house. And the day before I graduated college, I asked him if I could move back because the one thing I knew about my dad was he had integrity, both my parents. He was a solid person. So he said, you want to come back? I don't want you drinking. Not once, not at all. You have a 10 p.m. curfew 7 days a week, and that BMW you bought goes in the driveway. You're not driving a drug dealer's car. Your mother has a Volkswagen with no bumper and a bungee cord holding the hood down. You drive that. And you know what I did? Because I wanted to have that integrity he had. So I lived with my parents till I was about 22, and they helped me I bought a 2-family because my business was doing well, and I moved in with me. And I was a bad roommate. I started drinking more, hanging out with older guys in the business. They were going out for scotch. I didn't even like scotch, but I would just, again, try to fit in. And then at about 25, 26, I had a major issue with health and I bled out. I was drinking too much and I ended up in a coma. And when I came out of it about a month later, when I got to the hospital, I go back and they said, yeah, we're glad you're feeling better, but we found tumors with cancer and we're going to have to do some surgeries. And then entered OxyContin. And I tell folks, I wasn't a victim, I was a volunteer. Like those tough guys I knew, they were OxyContin dealers. People would trade Rolexes off their wrist for one pill. And I thought I'd be exempt. I thought I was stronger and they were weak and all that. And next thing I knew, OxyContin did what it should do. 9 months later, they told me they were going to take me off the medicine. We were done with the surgeries. At that point, you weren't taking me off. So I bought them on the street. And before you knew it, over 3 years, I went through probably $750,000 of savings and investments, 401k gone, 2 houses gone. And before I know it, I'm on the streets. I'm an intravenous heroin addict. And I thought that was the bottom. I thought I was over. And I remember getting in trouble. I was on probation for this and that. And I remember going to jail. The day I went to the courthouse, I said to my friend who's the chief of probation, "You're never going to hold me. Come on, don't be like that." And he said, I said, "You wouldn't screw me." He said, "Screw you? You've been getting arrested, fighting, drinking on probation." He said, "I'm holding you." And that they say it's darkest before it's dawn. It is. I went to jail. I did a little time, not much. I got out through the grace of God. I asked for treatment rather than go out back onto the street. And my life changed. I won't tell you it's been without relapse. I did have a couple of relapses early on, but it's been amazing. I've had people in my life that are just spectacular. I live a life where I wouldn't say I'm perfectly comfortable with my skin, because I think anybody with addiction or anything, you're kind of broken. I don't think you're ever fully whole again. But man, I'll tell you, I have something to share and help other people. And the business that I lost came back tenfold. I mean, it does great. I have a coaching business where I mentor other businessmen that go through midlife crisis, addiction. They own a business. They're too insecure on how do I run my business and stay grounded. And I've been able to take all the blessing, all the pain, and turn it into a blessing. It's been a positive. So I'm pretty lucky.
Yeah, it's a beautiful story. And I love how you said in the beginning that a lot of what has formed you was the suffering, because it's
Yeah.
true. Our suffering carves us out. And I also just love how you described your life sort of as this pursuit of authenticity, like trying to find yourself deeper and deeper and feel comfortable in your own skin, which I think is sort of the human experience.
Yeah, it's true.
Yeah. So I think it's very relatable. And for some of us, it's an easier path than for other people.
Yeah. I always say, I don't learn hard lessons. I learn really hard lessons.
Yeah.
Somebody said, in my 20s, if you asked who I was, I'd hand you my business card, or I'd let you know what I made, or this and that, and what I drove. Or at 44 years old, you know what I want people to know me is I'm a dad. I want people to see that I'm a good dad. I want people to see, like, I help homeless people, like, guys in prison, like that. That is far more important to me. I mean, we all like nice stuff, and I'm not going to say I don't, but I will tell you, I would trade the sports car to make sure my daughter has the right education for her autism any day of the week. And that's what it comes down to.
Yeah. So tell us a little bit more about how you became a coach, why you decided on that path, and sort of what that looks like for you now.
So it was strange. I always loved coaching guys. I always liked going to the jail and running programs, helping guys rebuild their lives, this and that. And my financial business exploded. I won't lie to you, it did better than I ever dreamt. I mean, it did 10 times what it did in my 20s, but the money wasn't enough. And it wasn't what it was about this time. Like, I don't want my legacy. If somebody remembers what I leave behind to my kids or to a charity, that's not what I want. It's like, I want what I leave in my kids. Like, I want my kids to have a different character because of my pain. So they don't have to, one, go through it. And two, more importantly, they're empathetic to those that do. And so I thought, well, I loved coaching like other, guys that were trying to build businesses and whatnot. So I'll just do that. And it's funny, I have clients that pay me ridiculous money, and I have clients that don't pay me because they can't afford it. I say, don't, I'm happy to do it. I'll meet you where you're at. I just love doing it. I like checking in with them daily. I like knowing how their lives are going. I was blessed to come back. And I believe that there are certain spiritual traits that I got. I don't even want to say traits, certain things I learned to build spiritually because I had good mentors. Nothing I say is authentic. I'll tell you right now, I haven't come up with one good idea. Trust me. But I've learned to follow some good ideas because my ideas aren't so bright. And I took these spiritual principles that were laid at my feet like a toolkit, and I built a life that I love, and I applied them to my business. And I said, geez, if these work for me, the spiritual principles, they'll work for anybody. It's like gravity. If I drop a key and you drop a key, they both hit the floor. So I started trying it with other guys, and I said, wow, this is amazing. And the reason I do it more with men is it's not a sexism thing. It's just, I feel it's more appropriate because I can relate to what guys go through more, right? I don't know what it's like to be a woman or try to be a first-time mother or anything. I can't relate. But I know what it's like to be a guy and have a child and find out your daughter has autism, and scary as all hell. Like, I can relate to that all day. And so I said, how do I pay it forward? And the money part, frankly, sometimes you make great money, sometimes you don't make anything. And that's not, I'm very fortunate. Now it's easy for me. I have the financial businesses that do very well. So I don't really have to chase the money. For me now, it's a passion project.
Yeah. Yeah, it's funny because Keith and I are very similar. We are both coaches, but we both see clients on a range, right, of free to expand because the truth is that $100 doesn't have the same value to every single person,
Exactly.
right? People are at different stages of their life and everybody needs healing. So if we are in a position to offer healing without charging an exorbitant amount, I feel like that's in alignment with making the world a better place.
Absolutely, and I believe the universe, I don't know if I call it, sometimes I say it's God because that's the only word I knew growing up, but spirit of the universe is some kind of energy out there that when I'm living the right way, when I'm praying, when I'm meditating, when I'm trying to be of service to others, somehow, if I do the right thing and don't worry about the money, like I'm provided for. I don't know how it works. I really don't. But I know what you guys are doing is unique and it's special and you touch lives. And if you can measure it by dollars and cents, man, you might leave somebody out there dying that could really use your help. And an hour of your time, yeah, it's valuable. But man, what a payoff if that person doesn't die. There's your reward.
Yeah. Yeah, I'd love to hear more about sort of your spiritual toolkit that you mentioned, because I believe that whether you call it spirituality or you have a different name for it, energy or God, you have to have access to something other than just this world
Yes.
in order to be fulfilled and successful.
Yeah.
And a lot of times I know when clients come to me, it's like they don't want to believe in the power of that stuff. Like, oh no, I don't need to spend 10 minutes meditating. Like, no, I'm just going to make all my phone calls. And you're like, well, wait a second, right? So talk a
So
little bit about like that spiritual toolkit and what you have found is really valuable in that.
yeah. So again, I find everything through pain. So at one point I'm in excruciating pain emotionally. I was barely sober. I was definitely suicidal. I was out of my mind. And a guy said, "Well, are you praying?" I said, "What do you mean praying? Like, where's God here, there, and everywhere? Are you meditating?" And I'm like, "No, what do you want me to do? Just sit there quietly?" He's like, "Yeah, I do." And I'm like, "That's not gonna work." He's like, "Well, do you do it?" I'm like, "No, but it's crazy. I mean, how's that gonna work? It's just killing time." When I started doing these things, so it was all just little suggestions. Like there are different readings I'll do in the morning, like little spiritual readings. I'm not overly religious, but I'm very spiritual. I believe there's something out there. When I'm mentoring a guy and they have a hard time with the spirituality, I take them up to the ocean and I said, "Listen, we're gonna stand here, and that water's gonna come in. It's gonna wash over your feet. It's gonna pull out the pain. It's gonna bring in some energy. And if you can have that, and you can just see that it comes in, and sometimes the tide goes out and then it comes back in. You can have good days and bad days. And if you can use that energy, call it whatever. I mean, there's windmills. There's something to this universe where there's something we can tap into. Or if you watch like you'll see a duck or a seagull flies down and eats something. There's a cycle to this world that's bigger than us. And as unique as we think we are, especially in the financial sector, we think we're so important, bringing in millions of dollars, this and that. And we're not that unique. I'm not that important. I mean, I spoke at a conference last week. I said, "Listen, I don't pronounce my R's. I mumble. I don't wear a tie. And I'm always in the top three in the country. And the funny part is it's the universe. Yeah, I'm not that important." You hear so many people that are so worried about dollars and cents and like what they wear. And I was like that. I mean, I still have stupid cars I bought. I have watches I bought when I was younger. And I think to myself, why? Like we all want to look nice, but there's something when you're tapped into for me, it's nature, I should say. I have a dog. I love dogs. Having a child with autism has learned. She's helped me tap into an energy I didn't know I had, because she's unique. I mean, she's just different. My daughter, it doesn't play like most kids, but once I learned to do things according to what she needs and wants, she's a superstar. And I think that's what it is. I mean, so I know when you say people say, "Well, that's not going," and they dive into their calls, and I fall off. I tell people it's like a spiritual battery. I'm charged up. I'm doing great. The next day I do a little less. The next day I don't make my bed. The next day I don't meditate, but I do pray. The next day I'm brushing my teeth while texting. And before you know it, I'm caught up in the now what's. Now what do I have? Now who do I have to call? But man, when you can slow it down, especially somebody like me who's already a type A, but when I can
Mhm.
slow it down, like the universe does for me what I can't do for myself.
Yeah.
That's
Yeah.
beautiful.
Yeah. And I love the way that you talked about it as a practice, because that's what I find too, is that doing a meditation practice or a yoga practice or whatever your practice is doesn't mean that you're perfect every single day.
No,
It means that when you mess up, you restart, and you become a master at restarting without self beat up, right? That is what it's about.
So true. I tell folks some days I'm just checking the boxes and some days I'm having home runs. The thing I like about the gym, for example, I love is when I go to the gym, some days I don't want to be there and I'm walking and dreading it. Sometimes I have a great workout those days. And other days I'm just going through it. I'm like, am I done yet? Yoga, I'm trying to get into. I'm not gonna lie to you, I struggle because I can't. I'm horrible with the poses, but I believe it's the fact that I show up and I'm willing to do it, and I'm willing to have the humility not to be great at it. It's easy to do what we do well, and it's taking that time for ourselves. It's away from the world and just breathing, just being present because this is a
Yeah.
fast. And I mean, if you look at it, if you watch the news, it's always negative stuff of politics. They're all barking at each other, and I think if people would slow down and like, this world, when you go back 100, a friend of mine just bought a farm up here and he turned into a recovery center. And I went up there because I just want to see, it was like a 20-minute ride. And when I got there, I was a world away. Honestly, it was the fastest 20 minutes. It got me 100 miles away or 1,000 miles away. I'm up there in nature and there's birds. He's got chickens. I'm like, where the hell? This is wonderful. And it was a farm from like back in the 1600s. We started talking about the families that owned it and how some of them were killed during the witch trials and like this and that. And all this unique story that came with it. And back then, if you had a neighbor and you had chickens, you'd bring some eggs over. And they might have a cow, they eat some milk. There was more community. And I think we go so fast and we lose the community.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah. I know that what you said a little bit ago about sort of being authentic instead of playing the role. Like, this is what a coach is supposed to look like. This is what a financial advisor is supposed to look like. This is what a successful person is supposed to look like. And I know that's one thing that I really admire about Keith is that he's always keeping that awareness of showing up in presence rather than in a constructed role of this is what it's supposed to look like. And that's how you sort of let the magic in, right? Is through just being there and being present enough to see what's arising, right? From
It's true.
nature. Yeah.
Busy, for me, like in my job, like certain aspects I have to wear more dressy clothes than others. And I think to myself, like, I'd rather be in more comfortable clothes. So clients, they come in, if they're going to be clients, they get to know the real Ryan. You know, I don't want to sit there. When I was younger and I first got sober, I'd pronounce my R's and and there's nothing wrong with people that speak well. But if it's not me and it's not authentic and I'm trying to focus on that rather than focusing on getting to know you as an individual, am I really being of service? Now, if I'm a very well-spoken person, that's a great characteristic for people that have that. My strength is I'm usually pretty upbeat and I can usually find a positive in most things. That's my positive, my strength. And it's so hard though for people to be authentic in this day and age, especially with social media. I mean, I don't do social media. My team runs it. I've never seen it, nor will I ever. It's just now I don't believe. I just don't want to see now. I know it's important to be plugged in and all that. And that's why they're great. But for me, I want to be where my feet are.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I'm curious if you'd be willing to share what allowed you to get out of addiction, because I think addiction is misunderstood in our culture. It's certainly misjudged in our culture, right? And it is a really challenging road. So, what was it that allowed you to come out of that?
So that's where the universe comes in. I gotta be honest. I call it God because I don't know how to say it, but I'm not thinking of a religious God. But I think that they're I don't I the only thing I can say is somebody took my hand. A guy saw me broken. This guy, when I first saw this guy at meetings, he looked like a bum. He'd be wearing these shorts that were way too short, riding this beat up bicycle. I thought to myself, but he spoke, and the way he spoke, this piece he had, I wanted to know him. I got his phone number. I only talked to him twice after that. But when I went to jail, this guy showed up. Turns out he was a director of some IT company. He showed up all dressed up. I was like, I thought you were like a bum. I just thought you were really spiritual. And he goes, no, I had a job. I just don't care what anyone thinks. And he called my mother while I was in jail. Who calls somebody's mother and listens to them cry when they're in jail? Nobody in my family's ever been to jail. And that changed everything. I saw something in this guy's, you know what? This is what it's about. Like, this guy's elite because he doesn't care. He doesn't care how he dressed. I mean, he dressed nice sometimes, but you know what I mean? That wasn't, I was drawn to him because of who he was as a character. And, this guy just taught me how to live. You want the truth? Like, I would call him, ask him, like, should I wear blue socks or gray socks with a suit? I called him with 100 questions. I called him when I first came back in business. I couldn't get clients. I would call crying. Um, every decision I made, I called this guy, and the universe worked through him. And next thing I knew, he was taking meetings, 12-step meetings, taking me through the book and like sponsoring me, and teaching me that, hey, Ryan, religion's for people who are really afraid of going to hell, but spirituality is for people who've been there. Your job is to connect somebody else to spirituality. And then next thing I knew, once I got in that system where I was kind of ebb and flow, people would come into my life and I would help this person and it would help me more than I was helping them. I was slowly getting so far away from addiction. And then God gave me rewards. Don't be wrong, I had relapses early on. I've had 13 surgeries in the last 5-7 years. So, and every time you have surgeries, they pump you full of opioids. Even if you're an addict, they're like, well, you need these for the first day or two. But then it makes it easier. Nowadays, if I have a surgery, not to fall back in, is I have a 4-year-old who has autism. She deserves better. And
Yeah.
don't be wrong, when people have kids and they're addicts, once you're in it, listen, you would trade your kid for a pill. That's how it is. But when you're in the other side of it, I have a choice today. So if I know I have something coming up that could put me in a compromised position, I'm on the phone with 5 guys. People are coming with me. They're holding the medicine. So I would say God within the universe working through people. I really believe it. Just one good person after another. Like what you're doing here, you're sharing good thoughts with other people. You're helping people connect, and we learn from each other. I mean, I don't have one, like I said, any original ideas I have, I'd be embarrassed to share.
Yeah. Yeah. It seems like when I ask people that question, it's a common response that there was someone in their life who was so filled with love, so filled with joy, so, bright, and made everybody else in the room feel better about themselves. Right. And that is always what I try to remember for my goals is I want to be that person, right? That walks into a room and makes everybody feel better, that people can feel love emanating off of me, right? Because that's how you change people, by who you are, not what you do. And so I love the way that you described that you got lucky enough to have people who were doing that, who were showing up as their full selves and just shining their light, and it hooked you.
This guy, Billy, I wanted to be him because he fought like me, he drank like me, he drunk like me. But he would walk in, he was in good shape. He'd walk into me, his shoulders back, and then he would gently talk to another guy and say, hey, how you doing? You'd think he'd be this rough, hey, how you doing? You doing all right, T? You look great. Or you look off. You want to talk? And he and I are so close now that they had choked up. This guy changed my life, changed everything in my life. This guy literally did a 180 of my life. I went from being a materialistic, greedy person who didn't care about himself, let alone anyone else, to genuinely just not giving a damn about stuff, and just trying to be a good guy. And he taught me by his actions. Like I'd hear his words, but it was his actions. And he just moved to Florida because he's semi-retired. And his birthday was April 2nd. I just showed up on a flight to surprise him. Like that's how close I am to him and his wife. And they're just amazing people. She had the patience to let him take time away from her to be with me. And yeah, I was a heavy lift. I'm bipolar. I have ADHD, obviously, and I was a heroin addict. I had a lot, and I had court cases going on. I was trying to rebuild a business, and she not just allowed, embraced it. And I mean, I would go through breakups, and I would show up at the house crying. I would remember once I breaking up with a girl after 3 years, and showing up at their dinner date night, crashing their date, and I just walked. And I never felt guilty because I felt like it was okay, and it was okay. And that was the love that they showed me. So it wasn't just Billy, it was Michelle as well. But the kindness and like just pure selfless love and the way he showed me how to live. Like I remember saying one day to him, "Oh, I got to fight and knock this kid out." And he's like, "You don't do that anymore. You're a recovery man. You don't do that." I remember telling him about like something about disrespecting a girl. Basically, like I was, I was dating a lot and I wasn't really treating women the way I'd want somebody to treat my daughter. And he said, "That's not how a recovery man treats a girl. You don't just like hook up with girls and leave. You have respect for women." And he taught me one thing at a time. Before I knew it, like it all made sense.
Yeah.
I love such an amazing book called Chasing the Scream
Really?
about addiction. Yeah, I believe his name is Johan Bari. He was investigative journalist. He had a friend that unfortunately passed away from an overdose, and he wanted to get into and understand the nature of addiction. And he found, as he traces it back to like the opium crisis up in Canada, when they were bringing in people from Asia and stuff to build the railroads, he traced it all the way back down to one thing, and it was shame. Shame is the thing that drives addiction. And the way that you're describing, like the guy who's like this IT guy, but comes up on a bike and looks like a bum, there was no judgment. There was just empathy and love. And then your friends, the empathy, the love, the sometimes tough love, like saying, no, this is not what we do, but when you go into the system, when you're dealing with the police, when you're dealing with correctional officers, when you're dealing with probation officers, a lot of times you can see, you can feel the judgment coming off of them, which just drives that guilt and that shame that I would believe like an addict would already feels naturally.
You just nailed it, and I'll say this, you talk about where we're being in the right place, right time. So I ended up getting most of my legal issues were in the town of Woburn, Mass. Just so happens the chief of probation in Woburn, his name is Vin Piero, he had started an opioid crisis program back in 2003 because they knew they had a problem on their hands. So they had an understanding of what it was. And he understood, he and I knew each other. We were friends at one point. And then obviously and now we're really good friends. We talk almost every day because now I'm on the other side. I speak for the state. I go to prisons, and the chief of police now in Woburn was was a detective, a narcotics detective. And Bobby and I are really close friends because he got it. I remember one time he walked by my cell. He said, "I'm going to buy you lunch." And I said, "Don't look at me. I'm a junkie." So you nailed it, the shame. He said, "Don't look at me." I said, "Don't look at me. I'm a junkie. Please look away." And he said, "You know what, Ryan? There's no perfect people. And if there was, we probably put nail them to a cross." He said, "It's not you." He said, "I'm going to get you lunch." And now Bobby's one of my closest friends. When he made chief, he called me 11:30 at night one night. This is a guy who arrested me at least a dozen times. How about this? I have 15 clients, now 16 actually last week, 16 clients that are cops retired that have put handcuffs on me, that have
Wow.
arrested me. I manage their money. I manage their life savings for them and their wives. So that'll tell you about the turnaround in the world. Like when that energy shifts, and you nailed it though. It's the shame. When you said chasing the scream, I did think it's like you're chasing a ghost. Once you get high, you're thinking it's high. You're always chasing it. And it's elusive. You're never going to get it. It'll just take all your money and leave you out there embarrassed, ashamed. And the shame, how do you go to somebody and say, like, for me, I grew up in a nice family. How do I go to my cousin who's a state trooper? We grew up in the same house. He's a great guy and say, "Hey, Scott, I got a needle in my arm." The funny part is when I was I'm sober. I mean, he reaches out to me all the time. We have a beautiful relationship, but how do you do that? The shame. I don't know how you get by it. I was very lucky. I go to therapy. I nailed it. I hit a home run. I landed exactly where you want to be if you're an addict.
Yeah. I love that I guess your life proves that change is always possible. There is never a situation that is so dark that you can't come back from it. And on the other side, the people in your life, how valuable for us to let other people change and not hold them to their mistakes that they made a year ago or 5 years ago.
That's a good point. I never thought of that because I did have a lot of people hold me, and I tried to make things right. There was one guy I remember saying, "I'm sorry I let you down. Is there something I can do? And I'm tired of using I'm sorry's. There must be something I can do to make it right." And he said, "Ryan, I'm glad you're sober." He said, "But I wish you would die." I was like, "All right. That's between you. That's between you and your universe, my friend. Nothing I can do now." I tried making it, but most people are pretty understanding. Say, "Hey, you know what? I'm glad you're doing right." Or, "Hey, like there's one guy, he lost 20 grand on a trade. So I made a deal. I can't say it live on this because it's illegal what I did, but he got that 20 grand back because I said I owed him that. If I wanted to make sure that there was never a time I'd have to cross the street out of shame because that's how you use.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's funny for you guys to know that and not be in those. It's easy for me to get it because I've lived it. But for you guys to know that, for you to say that was pretty mind-boggling. It's impressive.
And I think it's such a good thing to see as well. Like when you describe your family, you weren't describing, this horrific childhood growing up. So that shame, I think a lot of times society is built sort of on that materialistic bent, that shame kind of comes in naturally. So you can have great parents, a great upbringing, everything that you need, all your needs supplied for, and that shame can still slowly creep in, where it then leads us down that path, to trouble.
Yeah, it's strange. I mean, now don't be wrong. When I was young, my uncle, before he had passed, would put cigarettes out of my arms. He did some stuff that was screwed up, but and he would say some nasty stuff. But he was gone by the time I was in second grade. And, and the therapy worked through that. But I think it is. I think, and for me, my parents worked so hard to put me in Catholic school because they wanted to give me a better chance. And what happened was I'm in school with all these kids, so they're driving nice cars, this and that. You're always feeling less than, always. And I didn't realize how much that drove me until I cared so much more money later on when I was buying the Ferraris and the Mercedes and all the BS, because I was doing it because I was trying to fill some sort of void. And then I remember when I would drive it, I would feel less than embarrassed because I felt like a junkie driving around in a high-end car. And meanwhile, I'm sober. I'm like thinking to myself, then one day I realized none of it matters either way. I'm not that unique. I'm not that important. If anybody's that impressed or disgusted by what I drive like that, that's their thing. Like, and I think having a child gave me that blessing. It really took me out of me. Because I was really, I think the disease of addiction is a very self-centered disease. You're either pitying yourself or you're trying to fill your needs, and you don't realize how many people you trample along the way. And even when you do realize it, sometimes you don't have a choice. I hate saying that, but
yeah. I heard something yesterday that I really loved, and somebody said, when you choose a path, you also choose all of the hardships and lessons along that path. And I thought, what a beautiful way to say it, because most people say, oh, I choose this path. And then when the hardships come up, they go, oh, what the hell? I don't, right? There's some aversion to it. And when I hear you talking, I really hear that philosophy. You're like, no, I choose it every day. I choose to call my support system when I need help. I choose this. And that you didn't shy away from any of the cleanup you had to do, right? Any of the shame you had to manage. You just said, I chose this path to be clean, and there's going to be all these hardships, and I'm facing them with my head held high and my shoulders back.
it's funny. I wanted to move when I was going to get sober, I was in jail. And I remember I got to get sober. And I knew guys who went to jail got sober. So I thought maybe this will work for me. Maybe jail's what I need. And it really was. So they were going to release me on parole. This lawyer I had worked it out. They were going to let me out of jail. It was like 2 months. And I looked at the judge and said, Your Honor, if you release me today, I'm going to get high. If you're willing to get me treatment, I'll stay in a cage till you get me treatment. So I stayed in a cage. I stayed in jail an extra month. I got treatment. Then the probation officer I had was the devil, the actual probation, not the chief, but the probation. He was the worst. He was the biggest piece of, and so he would say to my mother, he'd make her cry. He didn't like this jail. He's going to hate where he's going now. And so the judge said, Mr. Skinner, you don't want to stay in jail to get you better. We'll let you go home. And if we find you treatment, I said, you let me go home. I'm not coming back. I'm going to use. She said, all right, if you want to fight your lawyer, I'll do it. So I stay in jail. They get me treatment. I go back. I have to go back for what they called it. Bottom line was a kid stabbed me. I stabbed him back with his own knife. It was a long story. It was just self-defense, but it didn't look good, obviously. I had that case open. So after jail, I'm in a sober house and I go back and I still have that open. And the district attorney's office wants to put me back in jail. The judge is like, he's already been to jail. He's sober now. At that point, 9 months. So she says, Mr. Skinner, would you take time served? I said, yeah, I would. So she said, all right, we're going to reconvene in the downstairs courtroom. I go down, I walk by probation. My probation officer is sitting there. Now, I was told to pray for other people. When I was in jail, I prayed that I could get out. I could murder. This is awesome. I'm embarrassed saying this, that I would kill him and his family wouldn't miss him. Then that I would kill him, or I wouldn't kill him. He'd go die in the woods and his family would miss him. Then that he wouldn't die, but he'd go live somewhere else. It wouldn't bother me. This same guy, I walk by his office. He says, Ryan, what are they going to do? How's your case going? I said, oh yeah. I said, I'm going to take time served. I don't have to go back to jail. He goes, yeah, but I'm not sure it's good. I go, no, don't ruin this for me. I'm thinking to myself, he's going to put me back in jail. He walks in the courtroom. He says, Your Honor, I've never seen a heroin addict come back this far at 30 years old. If we charge him with this, he will never get his old job back. And then he's got no choice but to go to a bad life. Can we give him 3 years probation? Just wrap it up. The judge goes, Mr. Skinner, you're a lucky man. Hits the gavel. This guy was the devil. And here he is. I mean, he's a good friend of mine. There's a picture of him in my office now. But at the time, he was my nemesis. You don't know who's in your life for a reason. I will never get over that. So I had 3 years probation. They called me and I was behind on paying my probation fees. I had no money. I go to the courthouse. I'm like, they got to put me in jail probably, or at least hit me with a fine. And I walk in and they clear the courtroom. Now, the last time they did that, they sentenced me. I'm like, oh my God, I'm going to jail. I'm sweating. And the judge says, Mr. Skinner, you're behind on $200 of fines, whatever. I said, yeah, Your Honor, I have no money. I'll give you my shirt. I'll give you anything you need. I have nothing to give you money-wise. I want food stamps. I want mass health. And a shoulder comes up my arm. Like a hand comes on my shoulder and I look, it's the judge's sentence that gave me the 3 months probation, who thought I was crazy not going back to jail rather than treatment or waiting for treatment. She says, Your Honor, I'm coming in and she's in jeans. She says, it's my day off, but I heard what Ryan was coming in. I want to vouch for him. Can we wrap up his probation today? It was 9 months into it. I still had 2 years and change. He's been exempt forever, whatever the word is. Just tremendous. And she said they wrapped it up, no fees, nothing. It was done. The universe had lined things up that everything I thought was for my harm was there for my help. When I had a relapse, I called that probation officer and that chief probation and that cop. It's the guys, I relapsed, I need help. These are guys who could have put me back in jail. I wasn't even on probation, but like these people have played such a role in my life. The man I am today as a father. I'm going through a divorce. I'm the chief of probation, going through a really messy divorce. He's coached me through it. Actually, all three of them went through divorces. But like they teach me how to get through things with like dignity and like pride and without going off the deep end. I don't understand how it all works, but there's some sort of system to life. And I think you do have to take the high road. If you take the easy path, it doesn't work.
Yeah. Yeah. Such a beautiful description of how life weaves in ways that we can never comprehend, right? The magic of it.
So true. And I think if you don't have an attitude, you don't it can go either way. I feel like you can always go either way. And your attitude, the way you choose to see it is the way it's going to go. I mean, every time I've looked at things for a positive, when I found out my daughter was autistic, I broke down. I was negative. I was heartbroken. And it was awful. And a month after, I said, you know what? Maybe it's just a beautiful path. Maybe there's some positiveness. Maybe, although at that point she was nonverbal, I said, maybe it'll work itself out. And out of the woodwork comes a client of mine. He's a chief of child psychology at Children's Hospital, gets her into a treatment thing. Now she speaks great. She doesn't stop talking. She yips, she yaps. She's perfect. And all these little things happened for me. And I really do. I don't think anything happens to us. I think it happens for us. And I think if we're willing to go through it, but that's why I believe in coaching so much. Like, I believe in what you guys do, because here's the reality. If you don't have somebody who can kind of shine some light in your life, for me, it was Billy. For somebody, it's you. If you don't have that person, you're not going to see it always. The glass isn't always half full.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. So tell us a little bit about your podcast, because I want to hear about how long you've been doing your podcast, what you talk about on the show, and let's switch gears a little bit and hear about what you're doing.
So the podcast was when I was starting to do coaching. They said, you should have a podcast. I said, well, I don't want to talk about finance because it's what I do all day. And it's not that interesting. I don't, and I said, and I don't want to talk. I mean, it's interesting to me because I'm a geek, but to other people, and I didn't want to talk about all the coaching stuff because it's not one size fits all. So I don't want to start giving advice that somebody might try to do. And again, I always say, if somebody signs up with me to do coaching, I'll get them with the material, I'll flip them to the spiritual. They'll look at what I have and the shiny crap. And then one day then they'll learn it's not important. And so the podcast was something they said, you have to have a podcast. I said, all right, but I'm going rogue with this. I'm doing what I want. They said, fine. So the podcast is usually a guest of one of three things. One, an addict or an alcoholic he came back. Two, we have a lot of law officials, chiefs of police, chiefs of probation. They talk about from the other side of things, like what they're seeing, how they're trying to make a difference, how they're overwhelmed, to be honest with you. Three, I'll have a lot of athletes on, and we'll talk about like that letdown when you go from, like, my buddy Colin, I was with him last week. He goes, I go from being on the field with the lights on me to being not that important, and like what that's like, that letdown. Like, how do you get through that? How do you find yourself as an individual after going through playing a role? Like, you are, he was a safety on the Carolina Panthers, but now he's not. He's a finance guy and he's just normal. My other buddy went from being a football player in first line, and then he was a janitor. How do you find yourself in all of that? And I think that's what we're all trying to do. I think, and the longer it takes us to realize stuff isn't important, the longer it takes you to really get fulfillment in life. So the podcast, I interview people. I want to know their traits. I want to pick out characteristics, traits, things that they have or they've cultivated that have allowed them to get through life, take the bumps and bruises, and come out okay. Because we all have bumps and bruises, right? I mean, think about it. You've got stuff in your life, and when you're coaching, you're on your podcast, you can't really run through it. But there's stuff in your life that hurt, obviously, because that's why you want to help people.
Yep. Yeah, I think your philosophy about coaching is completely in alignment with ours, that it's individual and nuanced to every single person. There is no, do these 10 steps and you're going to be happy and everything's going to go right? That's just a fantasy. And so really it's about the investigation, right? It's about finding the heart, finding the soul, and letting that wisdom come up. And so I love to hear other coaches that have that philosophy rather than are trying to teach a specific way that someone should be, which I think sometimes can actually be more harmful than helpful.
Well, yeah, because then we're inflicting our beliefs of what we think will work on somebody else. And I did that early on. I won't lie to you. I would tell people, do this, this, or this. And sometimes they would have success financially and they think
Yeah.
it was and I tell people that's the worst thing that can happen. The worst thing that can happen for a drug addict is if I use today, nothing happens because it's gonna get bad. Same thing. If I give advice to somebody just to help them make money and they make money, because they're gonna realize it's the now what? Okay, I've got money now what? I'll give you an example. 2 years ago, I'm pulling up to my house. I've got the house I built it. For me, it's a dream house. I grew up, my mom was a housekeeper. So for me, it's perfect. And I don't owe any money on it. I'm in a high-end sports car and I got a beautiful daughter inside and my puppy dog and a wife who I'm going through a divorce at that time, but we were still at that point in decent terms, And I remember sitting outside the garage thinking, why do I want to die? Like, why do I want to die? I'm sober. I've got all these things on the outside, the businesses, the this, the that. Why do I want to die? And that's what led me to start looking at this path. That's what led me down to the coaching, to be honest with you, was there's got to be more to life. I mean, yeah, we all want to have success, but success is different for most people. Success for me is I know that my daughter, no matter what goes on tomorrow, if I die tomorrow, she'll be able to get the education and the services she needs to be okay. That's it. It's not about like, if she this or me going here. I mean, it's about I can make sure and that day to day I go to work and I can help people protect their retirement, or I can help guys learn how to do better at their job. If they're in finance is easy. Some guys come to me, they're not finance. Some guys are athletes, they're retiring. They're like, how do I find my it? Because we all have an it, right? There's that thing that you say, if I could do anything, this is what I would do. And I guarantee you're doing it right now because coaching's not an easy journey to get into. I mean, God, it's a lot harder than I thought it was. I had an easy finance came super easy to me. I made money, everything went well. Coaching is one, the money's not as good sometimes. And even when it is good, the stress you care about the people like your children. But it's also a hell of a lot more fulfilling than anything you've done, right? I mean, think about the beauty of it. I mean, the juice is worth the squeeze. I say it every day.
I love that.
It's a lot, but I'm going to tell you I gave up Fridays at my financial firm to do this. People think I'm crazy. They're like, you're giving up hundreds of thousands a year. I go, you know what? I'm not giving up anything. I'm fulfilled. I'm making more. You just don't see it. It's a different payoff.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think as our world begins to change, people finding value in something other than money or success or capitalism, I think that whole model needs to change, right? For us to sort of grow into the next level. And it's possible because, we have so many resources, and with AI, less people have to work, right? All this stuff's sort of changing in our world. And if we can find identity in something different than making money and being successful at this capitalistic game, right? Yeah, I think that is a lot of people are facing that right now, is saying, okay, I want to find the more.
Because they realize, I mean, think about people's 401ks and IRAs are at all-time high, so they have money. A lot of people, it's easier to make money now more than ever. I mean, I'm not that savvy in technology, but it is. And that's what's making people realize, like, it's a ghost. I mean, capitalism is, listen, I understand we need businesses to run, for countries to run, or we'll be like depleted and all this stuff. I do. I tell folks I'm socially liberal, financially conservative. Like, I think we have to have some control of money, but damn, let people live how they want to live. Let them be their truth self. Who are we to tell somebody what's right for them? And, I don't believe in that at all. And I will tell you, I think it's amazing that like how often I see people and their biggest thing they say to me is, right, like, I thought I was supposed to be happy. I thought I was supposed to be different.
Yeah. Yep. I
Yeah,
hear
it's
that.
almost like people wait for happiness to be delivered like Amazon. Like there's one day a box is going to show up on the porch. They're going to open, be like, I'm finally happy. And I did that for 20 years until finally I started looking inward. And then that's where I found like, oh, so yeah, happiness is a byproduct of that fulfillment. It's not something that you're just going to get and hold on to, and it's just going to be.
Yeah, it's true. It's kind of crazy because it's kind of like the yoga practice, right? We have to do it every day. We have to live it. And it's a very hard thing to stay removed from this world it's a screwed up world. I mean, good example. Watch our next election. We have a senile guy and a crazy guy running against each other. I don't know who you like, but it's kind of a lose-lose situation. You would think that, hey, there's got to be I believe this. I like to believe most people are good. I really believe that if you interviewed most Republicans, they'd probably find somebody who's a better character, right? And I don't want to offend anybody, but like somebody who's a better quality human being and maybe has more liberal beliefs, realizes that the far right doesn't work. And I believe you interview most left wing people. I don't think Biden's necessarily a bad guy, but he's old, But you can find some younger person who says, hey, I know that these are our beliefs, but I got to come together because it's a cut. And I think that most people could come together. But because it's profitable to keep people divided, they do that. And this
Yep.
country runs on money, and the whole world runs the same way, basically. And it's based on just like setting these goals. Like my daughter watches this movie. I'm trying to think of the name of it, but they talk about the guy makes it's a movie by what's the guy? Dr. Seuss, and they make it Needs. Have you ever heard of this movie? And the Lorax
Oh
comes.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
But it's a perfect example. He warns them about they're cutting down all the trees. This guy's making scarves. I'll just call them thieves. Everybody needs a thief. And they wears a hat, a scarf, and they all buy this crap. And then there's no trees left. And then they miss the little animals and go. And that's the world we live in. It's a chase for what? I mean, an ex of mine used to have high-end handbags. At one point, she probably had like 20, 30 bags. And I remember thinking to myself, there's like 50 grand worth of bags in this house. And we don't go out to dinner ever. Like, I mean, maybe with the kids somewhere. And I thought, geez, like, what world are we living in? Like, you can't even impress the people that are dumb enough to be impressed. And and she didn't, and she got it eventually because her mother committed suicide, her brother overdosed, and she wasn't an actor, so well, she might have been but not like I was. But everybody gets it at some point, and whether it's too late, I think some people on a deathbed look back. Nobody ever says, "I wish I had more money or I saved more."
Yeah.
Man, imagine if your neighbor was homeless, you could have got them into treatment.
Yeah. Yeah. Beautiful. I've really loved this episode, and thanks so much, Ryan, because I just feel like just that you said so many deep truths, and thank you so much for
Honestly, I learned a lot just sitting here with you guys because it's nice to hear other people say some of the stuff I think, because in my industry and stuff, it's so like last week I'm at a conference and I learned a lot and I shared what I could. But these people, like I said, they started paying attention because of the material. I talked about the spiritual, and then some paid attention. I talked to after, like, these people could actually change and have a good life and not care. And others would just ask me, like, so how do you get that extra client? Like, how do you manage $500 million? And I'm like, you don't want to know, because if I tell you, you're gonna think I'm a donkey. And like if I tell you I give away 10% of what I earn, you're gonna think I'm insane. And it's just it's nice to hear what you guys are doing, because I think it's so necessary.
yeah.
And you guys are somebody's Billy, and that means a lot to me to hear.
Yeah.
He's a lot, man. And I love just how you are, because I think me and Mindy were talking before, with the mental health industry, which is, there's a lot that's going on that's good, but there's stuff that I don't like, and one of the things I don't like is, when I was going in to use it, like at the VA, like my past and their past, we didn't align, and I was immediately judging. So we need people like you to talk to people like us for us to understand. You know what I mean? So I love that, man.
I appreciate it. It's funny. I'm very open with my clients. They know I'm bipolar. They know I was an intravenous drug user. I have no shame in that part, because I look at it this way. If I don't share with you, like I've got 4 clients that in the last 12 months, I got their kids into treatment. And the reason I got more involved like that was that one client who a year and a half ago, I knew her kid had a problem. She was telling me stuff. I think he has an alcohol problem. No, he's got an opioid problem, and they found him dead. And I just think now, if I can be more open, and yeah, I might lose some clients. I mean, I had one guy say to me, he's like, listen, I respect what you're doing. I can't give $4 million to a heroin addict. I go, I get it. I'd feel the same way. I would. I mean, I would. Who wouldn't? But I also have a lot of people that say, hey, it's really cool, great what you're doing. We're happy to be a part of it. That's a blessing,
Yeah.
Yeah.
I love what you do.
Yeah. That's
Yeah.
beautiful.
Well, is there anything that either of you want to share with our listeners before we wrap it up for the day?
You're up, boss. You got anything?
Man, the thing I love the most is that we need more, and I don't mean this in a bad way at all. We need more unprofessional dudes to stand up and talk to other guys, the way guys can talk to each other.
Yeah.
So yeah, and that's one of my biggest fights, is that I try to be a certain way, but I don't want to, I feel myself like, oh, no one's going to listen to me if I say what I'm really thinking, or if I say it in the way that I want to say it, but knowing that you're out there too, like just makes me like feel like I'm not as alone as I thought I was. So yeah, you've impressed me a lot, man. I love what you're doing.
Don't be too impressed.
I love how you're breaking that stigma and being honest and open and vulnerable with your clients and saying, look, this is just what it is. Cause we all have those skeletons in our closet, so yeah, just more power to the unprofessionals.
I love it. I love it. I tell people all the time, if you're looking for somebody like that, I'm just not the guy.
Yeah.
For so long, I pretended to be that guy. When I got everything, I always say, you know what? God played a joke. The universe played a huge joke on me. I got everything I prayed for, and then I wanted to die. So, now it's a different vibe.
Yeah.
Well, I got to tell you guys, in closing, you guys remind me of people that I would love to connect you with a friend of mine who has a podcast. He was a former pro football player, became a janitor. Now he's a big coach, motivational speaker. His Marcus Ogden. And he has a podcast called Getting Authentic, and I was on it, and that's how we became friends. You guys would be awesome for him. It's the only reason I was thinking about it. I was like, oh my God, these folks would be so good. Because around a lot of people that are authentic, and I really appreciate what you're doing because it's special. You guys are somebody's billionaire. I get choked up saying it because that means a lot, more than you know.
Yeah,
Well, thank you so much. And yeah, we would love to be connected. So we'll talk after the show. We'll email.
Sounds good. Guys, thank you so much for having me.
Yes,
Yeah,
thank you so much. Thank you, listeners, and we'll see you next week.
You all.
Thank you for listening to the Chasing Thoughts podcast. Please support us by liking, subscribing, or leaving a review or comment. We would really appreciate it. If you'd like to be a guest, we would love to explore life and what it means to be human with you. Please email us at chasingthoughtspodcast@gmail.com.